My guest today is Andi Last. Andi is the very talented media manager at Pure Financial, the company behind the Your Money, Your Wealth podcast. In the past 3 years, she's managed to grow the audience of the show by 535%. And the show regularly places in Apple Podcasts' top 100 investing podcasts, a category which is cutthroat. In this episode, we talk about download milestones, how to use podcasts as a lead generation channel, how she leverages data to further grow the audience of the show, and one very easily overlooked pitfall that podcasters should avoid at any cost. So listen up and let's dive right in. Hi, Andi. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Solal, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you recently released a really interesting article on how you grew the Your Money, Your Wealth podcast by 535%, which I thought was super impressive. And when I read that article, I thought we have to have you on the show. Do you mind presenting, the company you work for and the show a bit for our audience?
Yeah, sure. No problem. And thank you. I appreciate it. And I want to say in advance, I'm actually looking forward to having this opportunity to learn from you as well. So don't be surprised if I asked you some questions too. Anyway, the company is called Pure Financial Advisors. It's a financial advisory firm based in California with offices around the United States. And Your Money, Your Wealth actually started as a radio show back in 2008 for clients in California, with the intention of trying to generate more clients. And then in 2014, they made it into a television show that aired in San Diego, which is where we're based. And then in 2016, they actually turned the Your Money, Your Wealth radio show into a podcast. I got involved in 2017 as a contractor, and then 2018, I became a full-time employee of Pure Financial Advisors. So at the start, the podcast, the intent was for it to be a value add for existing clients of Pure Financial Advisors. And then we started realizing that it actually was an excellent lead generation tool, in addition to being, a great source of financial content for the website. And it's grown from there.
Interesting. Yeah, I was about to ask you about the goals. So the fact you mentioned it was first a retention tool, and then it became pretty obvious as a success game that it also would be a great lead generation tool. I think in the article you mentioned that 76% of your leads, or at least of the people who require additional information or material, they do say that they heard about Pure Financial either via the podcast or YouTube, which is extremely impressive, right?
Yeah, I was really shocked to see that. And also, I should mention that we shorten Your Money, Your Wealth to YMYW. So I will mention it as YMYW. But yeah, 76% either said that they heard about it from the TV show, the podcast, or from the YouTube channel, and since both the podcast and the television show are also on the YouTube channel, I actually think that it's probably more of that 76% came from YouTube. So yeah, that is, I find absolutely fascinating. And those are people that come to our website and actually download one of our downloadables, a guide or a white paper or something like that, or fill out any form on the website. We ask them, how did you hear about Pure Financial Advisors? And that's what they let us know.
It just goes to show that podcasts can be such a powerful medium, like a great acquisition channel for companies that are willing to put the time and effort into building a great show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about milestones, because one of the things I'm trying to do with this show is maybe demystify a bit, how much it takes to be successful with podcasting. And I have a feeling that sometimes, new podcasters don't see growth, they don't see traction in the first month, and they might be a bit discouraged. So I like to talk about, how the audience growth looked like in the beginning for you. Like, how did the curve look like? Was it a flat line, or did it grow linearly? When did you have your big unlock in terms of audience growth?
Well, so as I mentioned, they actually started putting it out as a podcast in 2016. And 2017 is when I got involved as a contractor, and I was not privy to any of the download numbers at that time. And then when I joined as a full-time employee in 2018 is when I could actually see, the nuts and bolts of it and see all the statistical analytics and all of that. And it was in 2019. So up through 2018, basically, it was flat with very, very minimal growth. So that is to be expected. You got to kind of realize that podcasting is a long-term goal in a lot of respects. At least that has been my experience. For other people, it may be completely different. But the big thing that made a difference for us was when I realized that Libsyn, who is our podcast host, actually has the ability for you to limit how many of your podcast episodes are available in the podcast apps. And my understanding is that the reason for that is because of bandwidth issues and the amount of space that is on people's phones. But obviously, as that is changing so quickly, I decided to release the episode limits to make it so that the entire back catalog, all the way back to 2016, was available in the podcast apps. And that's when we started seeing the upward trend in growth, was when I released those limits to make it so that people could binge the back episodes.
Yeah, so to the listeners out there, if you might be using Libsyn or another hosting service. I'm not familiar with all the hosting services. I'm not sure if they all have this by default, but do check if you maybe have a limit there, and if you do, make sure to unlock your back catalog. I think that was the numbers released by Pod News, or they shared the news that at least 50% of downloads happen with the back catalog. Obviously, it's not going to be the case with every type of show, news show, probably not, but it's still a huge unlock to making sure your audience has access to all of this great content if it's evergreen.
And that's one of the things that we've found, is that as people discover our show for the first time, like this month, for example, they'll listen to all of the most recent episodes, and then that's when they've become hooked. Now they're interested in the show. They want to be listening on a regular basis, to the point where if we only release once a week, and so if they want to listen to something and they've already heard the most recent episode, then what are they going to do? They're going to go and listen to the old episodes. And we actually get emails from people fairly regularly who tell us that they have heard all now 408 episodes of our show. They went back and binged all of them. And my question is, what is wrong with you? But no, we think that's awesome. And so having that back catalog available, even though ours is a financial show, some of the information from 2016, 17, 18 is no longer relevant. But our show is so personality driven, as well as being content driven, that people will go back and listen just for the interest to hear, what we were talking about back then.
Yeah, it speaks for the quality and the entertainment factor of the show. And I'm guessing like these metrics, listeners listening to 5, 10, 15 episodes, like these engagement metrics that look so good, probably help you as well, in the rankings. I think in the article you mentioned that you're regularly in the top 100, top 50 in the financial category, which is a super competitive one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, and that I think this is specifically in the Apple Podcasts in the investing chart. And so watching how that changes, I believe those are more trends than, because they'll change on a daily basis. I think they change every hour. And so, one day you'll be number 50 and the next day you're number 200. So it changes like that, but being able to see the trends over time is really enlightening. And it's been in the last couple of years that we're consistently in that top 100. So again, it's a long-term prospect, and we're looking at the fact that, okay, maybe hopefully over the next couple of years, we can be in the top 50. So
I did see in the article that you did reach the top 50 at times, right? So pretty impressive. And by the way, if people want to check out these charts that we're talking about right now, I'll be adding the link to the article in the show notes. They can see for themselves. Before we go a bit into detail, talking about podcast promotion, I want to ask you a more general question. What has been the biggest challenge for you in working on the show?
The biggest challenge is my compliance department. We are, because it's a financial services firm, there's a lot of requirements and regulations and things that we are and are not allowed to do that have to be followed. And so unlike for a lot of podcasters where it's, you can ask for whatever you want within, whatever feels good to you, for us, it's a matter of, for example, we're not allowed to, at the time of this recording, we are not allowed to ask for ratings and reviews for our show. We are not allowed to engage very actively with the audience on social media or any place that's public, because all of our interactions with the public have to be archived off the internet for years and years and years. And so think about that, just a single video on YouTube, how many comments you can get and how much that conversation may change over years. And then, for us to have that all archived offsite, for 7 years or 10 years or however long it is. So as a result, we aren't able to use a lot of those same strategies, for audience engagement that many podcasters use very successfully. And that, if we had those things, the show would grow even more than it has. So it's been a matter of being as creative as possible within the really strict limits that we have as a registered investment advisor, which is the official, title of Pure Financial Advisors as a company, and what it is that the company is limited to be able to do.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue to go into the promotion side of things. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about, the fact that financial advice is heavily regulated, and so you have to play with certain boundaries and sometimes be inventive when it comes to podcast promotion. In the article, you listed number of tips, some of the tactics that work best for you. Do you want to give us a bit of a walk us through the tactics?
Sure. Well, like I said, because of the fact that we're not allowed to ask for ratings and reviews, I fantasize about the day when I can actually say, "Hey, go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review." But in the meantime, the other thing that I have found that is incredibly effective is to ask people to share the show. That makes a huge difference. And the number of emails that we get from the listeners saying, "I just found your show a couple of weeks ago because my friend or my coworker or my uncle recommended it," is fantastic. Those referrals are gold. And we get so many people that join and then, that listen because somebody referred them, and then they binge the entire back catalog, and then they know every single thing about, the nuts and bolts of our show and what the personalities are like and what it is that we need from them when they email us. All of that kind of stuff comes because somebody said, "Hey, you should go listen to YMYW. It's really funny and informational." So that's a big one, is tell people to, if they like the show, to recommend it to other people.
Yeah, so word of mouth is, you're right, it's so valuable because someone you know well is recommending the show to you. There's a much higher likelihood, for an average listener to go and actually check out the show, as opposed to maybe hearing about it in an ad.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
props to you for using that, and maybe to its fullest extent, actually explicitly asking for the audience to share the show with their relatives and friends. It's actually the first time I hear about it. So really interesting to
Really?
hear.
That
Yeah.
surprises me. I guess I don't know if that is because, I kind of live in a bubble because of the fact that we are financial, in terms of whether or not other people are really aggressively asking for ratings and reviews, and if that really does have a big impact. Because of the fact that we never have, and obviously people still do leave us ratings and reviews, and that's another thing that I will mention. Because of the fact that people do leave us ratings and reviews, I don't know that has that much impact, but it's important for people to understand that it's not a requirement in order for you to grow, to have those ratings and reviews. The one thing that we do as kind of a strategy to get around that requirement by the SEC is we'll read the negative reviews. Joe, one of the hosts of the podcast, loves to talk about the fact that, hey, so-and-so left this review and said, that they just laugh at their own jokes and they think they're so funny and they're really not. That actually makes people interested in kind of, the people who are really committed to our show get defensive on our behalf, which is kind of cool,
That's amazing. So it's an endearing segment of the show where they don't shy away from laughing at themselves.
Right, absolutely. And that's an important part too. Yeah, that, and I say that in the article, is that the content and the hosts being engaging and interesting, that is the most important, that is the biggest strategy for podcast growth, is making sure that you're making something that people continue wanting to come back to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's much easier to keep a listener than to acquire a new one, so makes a ton of sense. So in the article you mentioned you're not using paid ads. It was a very conscious decision to just grow off of organic growth. When it comes to organic growth, social media comes to mind first. Is there a channel that works better for you than other ones?
Like I said, we don't really use social media very much. So we will post the podcast to Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Those are the only ones really that we use. But I would say that having it on YouTube is the biggest deal. We don't have comments enabled on YouTube, so we don't even get the audience engagement from that. But the fact that we are posting the full audio every week, and then we also post video clips daily of an individual financial question being answered each day. Having that, and obviously because Google and YouTube are partners, they're related. YouTube being a Google product, all of the content that we are producing on YouTube means that we are showing up more in Google search results as well. And so, like last week, we had somebody that said that they Googled a specific financial topic, and the results brought them to one of the clips of our podcast on YouTube. So that is a very important thing. And I think that YouTube has more potential than almost any of the social media avenues. And now YouTube is actually starting to make podcasting an important part of their overall platform. So expect that to get even bigger. That's my expectation.
Is there a channel that you haven't had the time to explore and you want to explore more maybe in 2023?
Well, that's the thing. I would love to be able to get to the point where we've got enough time to and bandwidth and ability to be able to post and engage with people on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, but also to engage on Instagram. That's one that we've set up our Instagram page. We've never actually used it yet. So I would love to get to the point where we can do that. When you're working for a company where you're not the ultimate decision maker, then making it understood how important social media can be and how much of a lead generator it can be and how big of a deal it can be is a challenge. And so when expectation is, oh, just put an intern on it, somebody that can just handle the social media. I personally think that just social media in general, having that engagement, the back and forth with the audience on social is incredibly important. And if you're not doing it, start. Get involved in the community, in podcasting community for one, but also the community for your niche. Whatever it is that your topic is, go there and find the people that are interested in it. Go to Reddit, go to, whatever, Facebook groups, and get involved in the conversation, not just from a, promotional standpoint. That should not be the goal. It should be to become a part of the community. And then as you have things that are of value to offer in the conversation, then you'll get to be known for that, and you'll gain audience naturally that way.
Makes sense. It's also about choosing the right social media platforms. As you mentioned, like you should go for the ones where your audience is, but it's also about choosing those platforms that still offer decent reach, organic reach.
Sure.
And for the longest time, a lot of social media managers would use Instagram as a platform which didn't have any or very little organic reach left. So, it was all of this time invested in creating beautiful graphics and trying to engage with the audience, but getting not much out of it. But now with Reels, it seems that it's coming back, and who knows what's going to happen to TikTok. But it might be that Reels is the next big thing that podcasters should try and invest in.
And demographics actually matters a lot too. Obviously for a financial services firm, the goal was to be reaching those people who are pre-retirees or retirees. So we're talking about a significantly older audience. But when this podcast started really growing, especially as the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, started becoming a big deal, then you've got 30 and 40-year-olds who are looking for financial information that can help them to get out of the workforce as soon as possible. So obviously then our audience skewed much younger than we were initially expecting. And so making sure that you're also because obviously an older audience, you're going to have more luck on Facebook. And that actually was a pretty strong place for people to find us early on. But as our audience has gotten younger, we need to go to where younger people are hanging out on social media, which may be TikTok, or it may be, something that hasn't even come up yet. But that's one of the reasons why I also think that YouTube is important, is because of the fact that it tends to be kind of cross demographic. You'll get older people and younger people that are watching on YouTube.
There's a bit of a war raging right now on Twitter and podcast Twitter when it comes to video. A lot of people saying you don't have to do video, which, I mean, of course, if you don't know how to do it, it looks intimidating.
it makes sense, right? But if you do have the budget to invest in a good DSLR camera, you should probably by default try and like record yourself while you're talking. So have a camera indirectly recording you while you're talking. It's not that much additional work. You do need to like figure out the setup, but there are like really great tutorials on YouTube to do that. And then it's just free additional reach. Like so, I'm not talking about having great animated videos, but just the simple recorded format of yourself. You don't even have to be like have a guest or a debate show. It could just be yourself. I've seen that time and again, and it just works, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is that if you're making a podcast already, why not try and create as much content out of that recording that you're making as possible? So if you're recording the audio of it, why not record the video as well at the same time? And then that gives you the option to chop that up into smaller parts that you can be feeding out on social media, a day at a time, or, every couple hours, or however you want to do it. And you've only had to basically record it the one time. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And the other thing that I will say about that is, and actually we're not particularly good at this, we post the transcripts of the podcast on our website, but getting captions on YouTube is incredibly important as well. Obviously, so many people watch videos on social or on YouTube without the audio turned up. So making sure that people can read it is incredibly important. So do captions. Definitely do captions.
Great tip. And it's not just about like how people listen to it. It's also about the SEO part of YouTube, because it does index the captions. So
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely must have.
Well, here's another tip that I will offer up, which I didn't actually even mention this in the article, is the fact that a great way to get free growth is by appearing on other podcasts. So thank you for having me on this podcast. But one time that we have actually had a guest on our show, they ended up posting our episode on their show. So they just took the entire episode, the whole MP3, and posted it as one of their episodes. And we actually got a number of people who started listening because they heard our show on that other podcast. So that's a trick that I don't know that a lot of people are doing. But if you appear as a guest on somebody else's show, ask them for the audio, post it on your show. Then you're doing like true podcast cross promotion.
Yeah, I guess the fear there maybe for some indie podcasters would be, this means fewer downloads for me. But in the end, like if you have great content, want to lure them in and keep them, retain them once they've made the crossover, then it's actually a no-brainer decision, right? But you need to have the great catalog that Your Money, Your Wealth has.
And also the show that you are appearing on, if they have a reasonable audience as well, and obviously you want to make sure that you are actually agreeing, both sides are agreeing, yes, you can post my podcast on your show.
Definitely. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that without consulting.
Exactly.
Let's talk about frameworks a bit. You've managed the show for about 5 years now. I'm sure there are standard operating procedures or processes that you've developed over time to make your job a bit easier and save some time.
Now, if you're specifically talking about promotion, obviously, like I said, we kind of do very little promotion. So one of the things that I will do as soon as the episode releases is that I'll grab a link from Chartable so that it will post it. And then when you click on that link, it's going to open it in the best podcast app for your particular device that you're listening on. And then I will post that on, like I said, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And then we also use a social media scheduler. So I'll create that post and I will then put that in our scheduler to post again in, 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And so that is, kind of the extent of it. We do also, obviously, as a financial services firm, we have an email distribution list. And I think, about 40% open rate and 2% click rate on our emails. So, the podcast will release on Tuesday. The email, the YMYW newsletter goes out on Friday. And so it'll be interesting to watch how many people are actually downloading it on Tuesday, the day of release, because they are subscribed to it, and how many people are clicking the link in the email that comes out on Friday. So keeping an eye on your statistics and seeing when people are listening and where they're coming from, and then actually optimizing for the strongest channels is incredibly important too.
When it comes to promotion, it definitely does. I actually meant that in like a more general sense of frameworks. But I do want to come back to the point you made about scheduling, posting about episodes. in advance. And so your tip is to repost older episodes and like schedule them in advance, so like you have a regular flow of posts on your social media presence.
Absolutely. And that's, as I mentioned before, using that single piece of content that you're creating. If you just put it out on the day that it releases or the week that it releases and you never refer to it again, think about how many people you are missing. There's a lot of people who aren't going to have seen that initial social media post. So yeah, keep reposting it. If it's evergreen or if it's content that is not incredibly topical to what's happening right now, keep reusing it. You are going to get new people each time.
Yeah, so it's not set and forget, and you should try and maximize like all the hard work you've already put in recording, post-production, etc. Like you should really try and squeeze the lemon as much as possible.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that I will do with content, because our show, again, everybody's show is going to be very different in terms of what their goals are and what kind of content they're producing. Ours is a question and answer thing. People write in with their financial questions, and Joe and Big Al, the hosts of the show, answer their financial questions. So it's very segmentable. Each one of those question and answers is its own piece of content. And so as we put those out, then, a show might have an email about Social Security and another one about Roth conversions and another one about investments. So then at the end of the year or at the end of the month or whenever, I can actually make compilation episodes where I'm taking all of the questions on Social Security and putting them into one episode. And so reusing that content in that way is useful as well. You can do compilation episodes or, repackage the content that you've already made without having to, redo a whole bunch of work. You're just basically putting together things into a different arrangement and presenting it in a new way. So that's very useful as well.
Let's talk about data a bit. I've read from your profile that you're a bit of a data freak, let's say. What are
what gave that away?
What KPIs do you use to measure the success of the show?
Everything. I want to see growth in number of followers of the show. I want to see growth in the average consumption, that one is the bane of my existence, I swear, because people's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. And so we get people who email us and tell us that they want more episodes of the podcast and they want them to be longer. But then when I look at the consumption rates and I see them trending slightly downwards, it's like, you got to listen then. Number of subscribers on YouTube, number of followers on the podcast apps, the amount of consumption, and then obviously from a financial services standpoint, since that is the goal, the number of people who are actually downloading the white papers or the financial content that we're putting in the show notes, seeing how many goal conversions we're getting is also a very important KPI.
Let's talk about podcast SEO here for a bit. You mentioned the importance of optimizing your show title and description and the description and titles of your episodes. Do you mind walking us through your process here?
Well, that is actually how you and I met, is when I decided to check out Voxelize. And so that, I think, it's incredibly important. One of the challenges that I have with Your Money, Your Wealth is that it was an established brand. And so changing the title of the show was out of the question. We had already built up, brand recognition to a degree with that. And there's a giant comma in the middle of our title. And so that actually makes it so it's actually two separate terms. So that was a challenge as well. And, retirement, investing, Social Security, all these other topics that are of relevance, those end up being in the show description, which is great. And I know that you and I have had some conversation about whether or not adding keywords to the title of your podcast is a good idea. And obviously, it's a great idea. It is not something that I've messed with because of the fact that 70% or something like that of our audience listens on Apple Podcasts. And the last thing I want to do is ever have anything that would cause us to be dropped from Apple Podcasts, even temporarily. So I have not messed with that, have still managed to achieve a good deal of growth. And so, there are optimizing sites that will, you plug in your headline or your title, whatever it is, and it will give you a score. And so I'll mess with scores, and that'll actually be a big part of my production process, is making sure that the title and the description that I'm using for episodes is optimized as much as possible, that I'm going to get the strongest potential results based on what keywords people are searching for, the performance of our past episodes, what those optimizing sites tell me is, a good score, and all of those things. And I'll look at that before anything. And so as a result, that's why, if you search Apple Podcasts right now for Roth conversions, chances are Your Money, Your Wealth is going to be in the top 5. I can't guarantee that every time, but it's pretty likely, because that is an incredibly important topic that we talk about on the show very regularly.
The way we see things as Voxelize is the title is actually pretty fine to optimize, as long as you don't overdo it and it's not obvious, keyword stuffing. But then again, as you mentioned, there are also, branding considerations. You might not want to, change the name of a show that's been there for years and years and years. One trick is to, keep the title of the show, and obviously it's going to be the title that's also on the art, the cover art. But you could add, a hyphen and then describe the show a bit more. What can be dangerous if you start, reaching the, say, top 200, and you go in the zone where you're important enough that Apple will review your metadata manually with a human review, is meddling with the publisher name. There are also some great tricks there. You can just choose to change your publisher name to a very aptly named network name. For example, the Financial Network, and then there's nothing Apple can say about this, or the Financial Advice Network, because it's just like a normal name. That's the name of the network that publishes your show. But obviously that's a bit of a gray hat tactic.
That's interesting to know that, because some time ago I actually changed the publisher name to the actual names of the hosts of the show, Joe Anderson, CFP, and Alan Clopine, CPA. And so we rank very highly for people searching for CFP, which is actually incredibly useful, because that means that they are searching for people who are going to give them financial information from, some level of expertise, which a certified financial planner and a certified public accountant, obviously, those are people who you are potentially going to trust more than, some guy that just started a podcast to talk about money. So in that respect, that actually is incredibly useful for us, because that means we are targeting people who are searching for financial information from experts, or from people who are certified in finance.
We've done a survey last year, which we'll actually reconduct next year. What came out of this is that 76% of podcast app users have used the search bar of the app. So there's a huge, iceberg hidden under the water of like search volume and keywords that people are actually looking for in the podcast app that you would never think people, look up in a podcast app, but they do. What you mentioned about CFP is very interesting. That's also what came out from conversations with other guests. Like in the beginning, they were a bit surprised at how well optimizing their metadata worked for them, because it was a bit of let's say it's a hidden gem. It's still underutilized by most podcasters. Some have like very boring titles, or that don't contain, or vague, that don't contain any keywords. For some of our clients, it was a big unlock there, just slightly tweaking this metadata. Well, I guess we've covered all the topics we want to talk about today. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a treat to have you. Do you have something to promote? Where can people find you?
Well, yourmoneyyourwealth.com obviously is the website for the show, the TV show, the podcast, and the radio show, and all of that. And the company is growing aggressively, so expect to see more of us around. And you can see my blog post, which, what's it called? How 9 podcast growth strategies yielded a 535% increase in downloads. And you can find that on our website. You just go to yourmoneyyourwealth.com. You'll see a section called Financial Resources. And on the blog, you'll find my post.
Thank you so much, and have a great one.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.